Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. We have in the studio with us today, fresh back from Ukraine, 2-3 weeks over there, doing very interesting things. Rusty, trusty Rusty Russell, as we like to call him on the program. Hi, Rusty.
Hey, buddy.
Good to see you.
Likewise,
and,
mate.
of course, our favorite debonair commentator. You should be on the BBC.
I should
You're
be on
wasted
the BBC.
here.
Yeah, well,
You're wasted.
The BBC is, not the institution it once was, is it? That's part of the problem.
You would immediately raise the standard.
Yes, well, even The Voice is not very popular on the BBC these days. They prefer people with stronger regional accents.
Yes, of course.
They do. And people who have, are I'm trying to think of the word, pickled in wokeness, probably.
Pickled in wokeness?
Marinated in wokeness.
I like pickled in wokeness. I'm going to write that down, and that could be a segment in the future, Pickled in Wokeness, where we find ridiculous woke attitudes.
And there are plenty. There are plenty.
I had an interesting taxi driver who said, I took you to the station before. Oh, right, we got Tony on the line from Bydgoszcz. Tony, are you there? Tony, I'm sorry, I forgot you. Welcome. Welcome to the show. How do we do it without you? We're going to have to next week, but you've been a regular with us, and we really appreciate it. Your commentary is always extremely valuable, cogent, experienced, and a hell of a bicycle rider. You are, right?
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yep.
Cyclist, we'll say. Yeah, I feel like Larry King. I need some suspenders. Wouldn't look good with this shirt, And one hell of a cyclist, right? So
yes.
The taxi driver was saying to me, he said, I picked you up before and took you to, you're a journalist, right? I said, yeah. I said, he said, I was hoping you had seen the show and you recognized me. He goes, no, I recognize you because I gave you a ride. Do you remember me?
Oh, okay.
I was kidding him, of course. No one watches this show. And I said to him, yeah, I did remember him, actually, because I had to clear the police were in the way, and I had to get the police to move so he could pick me up and bring me to the station last time. And he's from one of the stands. I said, you're from a stand, aren't you? He goes, yeah, Kazakhstan. I said, yeah, you're studying here, right? With in the business school or something, economics. So we were talking, and I said to him, have you read Adam Smith? He said, no. I said, read Adam Smith. You've got to start with that because it's the blueprint. Well, you could go back and look at coinage with Copernicus and all that kind of stuff, right? Because you did early work about coins and currency. But, of course, you know that. But everybody knows that. But
if you're an economics student, maybe.
I found that there was it's in how do you say it, Grunjans?
Grujans,
yeah. Grujans, see, I always go to him for Polish pronunciation. It's the only city he knows perfectly is Grujans, and I can remember. Szczecin, he's very good on.
Szczecin, yes. I was in Szczecin last week.
Yeah, we were talking about it. Anyway, so in Grujans there was a monument to a speech that Copernicus gave there about currency. And so that's how I know that. Okay. Because I just ran across that. So, at any rate, he hadn't read Adam Smith. We started talking briefly about the energy, because we got big energy problems coming this winter, most likely, which means heavy reductions, or just English life as normal. Wear a sweater at home and don't drive anywhere, because it's too expensive anyway, right? So, or British, I should say. And that was a joke. Yeah.
Half your usage.
But it was kind of a semi-joke, because people, when I lived in England, I had 3 years in a flat with no central heating. Nice flat, but no central heating, which is pretty normal in houses in England and the country and things like that. So, it used to be anyway. Now, as I said, Kazakhstan, I said, gosh, you got a lot of oil and gas, haven't you? He said, yeah, we got a lot of oil and gas. I said, well, are you going to give it, put it over here, make some money? He said, we're trying to, because our government is not, Putin's trying to stop us. The government's not in line with Putin. I'm not up on this. Maybe you guys know more about this than I do. Maybe Anthony does. But it was just interesting to have that conversation. He says, we're trying to get our oil and gas into Europe. The Turks are behind us against the Russians. And all that becomes interesting, doesn't it? And Azerbaijan as well. Last time I checked, they have a lot of oil, right? So that was an interesting conversation. Vox Populi. From you know, they always joke about having a good conversation with a taxi driver, right? You're learning from your taxi driver? Yeah, there you are. Anyway, so there was that. Tony, how are you? How are things in Bydgoszcz?
Actually, a lot cooler than normal, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, the heat has sort of gone away a bit. Yeah, so one can breathe a little better.
No.
And,
hey, just an interesting note that you were talking about with the oil and the gas. Actually, the story that's been going around is that Russia has actually been burning its natural gas, about 10 million euro a day's worth of gas. And this has been going on for a few months.
yes,
So
that's a great point. That's a great point. Here everybody's starved for energy, and we have an energy crisis. We have also the climate, everyone talking about the climate, as if we can really change the climate. Climate will change us first, my view, anyway, for what it's worth. But this is going up in smoke, literally.
It's just a
What a great
blatant
way.
slap in the face.
And gas is the best thing, because it's the cleanest, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you think that says about the energy crisis for the winter, before we get into Rusty's travels, and he's going to tell us his adventures?
That's going to be a major issue for all of us countries that actually were dependent on Russia, since we have no clear solution or defined solution, should I say, for anything that we were dependent on Russian oil or gas, should we say. Who knows whom we're and where we're going to get it from. Venezuela can't supply all of Europe. The northern gas routes from Norway can't supply all of it. Greenland or Iceland, one of the two, can't supply all of it for Europe. So we're going to be facing extremely tough times. And the prices that they predicted back in February for this winter, they don't even count. They haven't even really put that thought into Russia actually burning it. They thought that this war would be mostly over, and they already would have come to an agreement. But no, it's not. We are going to be in for a rude awakening, all of Europe.
Energy and food. I think that's a good summation. Nick, anything to add to that?
No, it's a very difficult situation. Of course, largely this is due not just to Angela Merkel's policy of making sure that Europe was dependent on Russian gas, but politicians all over Europe failing to take energy security seriously and being captured by the Green lobby. I mean, as a young lawyer many years ago in the City of London, I worked on both electricity privatisation and water privatisation. You know, in the UK, particularly at the moment, there's a lot of concern about sewage discharge, which happens when it happens because the sewers are too small. So when there's rainwater and a lot of surface water discharge, the choice is either letting it out of various outlets into rivers and on beaches, or it going back into your homes.
Like the Odra.
Yes. Anyway, my point is, and my point is, but this was 30 years ago, and people were talking then about the need to invest in sewerage, the need to invest on the energy side in more energy generation. Here we are 30 years later. We've had 30 years of privatisation, which ironically has removed the ownership of many of the UK utilities from the British government to foreign governments, which has its own implications. And shareholders and others have had large salaries, large dividends, which is fine. But 30 years later, we're in exactly the position we were before privatisation in the UK. That's a UK-specific point. But this idea that somehow, and I heard it on the radio this morning, I was listening to Radio 4, somebody from the Greens, the presenter was saying, but surely now we need to actually, do something to increase our own energy self-sufficiency. The answer was yes, more green stuff. The green stuff cannot supply at the moment everything we need. And just can't do it. I challenge anybody who's watching to get into their cars and drive around and see how many of these damned windmills are sitting there and doing not very much. And the idea that this is a green solution, if you look at the carbon footprint of all the concrete that goes into the base where you put these pylons, the pylons themselves, the construction of the actual individual blades, over the useful life of it, this is not a solution at all. And then there's a very, sorry, I don't want to demolate the programme, but in South Yorkshire there's a very large, there are many, but there's a very large, one particular large power station, which used to be supplied by coal built mine next door. I mean, you know, South Yorkshire has a lot of coal.
Right.
But now it's been converted, so it now burns wood chips. The wood chips come from Canada. Nobody is going to tell me that the wood chips are...
Germany too, they're doing this.
Are any better than the coal. And it's even worse, because now, of course, all these companies being super green. Oh, we're going to offset our carbon by planting trees. What they are doing, and it's particularly acute in North Wales, in the United Kingdom, people are buying up farmland to plant trees, and they are forcing farmers out because farmers can't compete. And so we are, and it was the same with this stupid biomass nonsense. We're removing productive...
You don't think biomass is a good solution?
Yeah, no, all these biofuels as well, you know, 5% of your petrol.
Well, they're calling the wood chips biomass.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
really true,
but the whole point is the planet is not big enough to say, oh, we're going to stop growing food now, we're going to plant some trees to make us feel better. We should be planting trees, but we should not be taking agricultural land out of food production at this time. It is crazy, 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 because the politicians are captured by the lobby groups. They've lost all interest in the people they're supposed to be representing or governing. They're captured by big business. And it's for the first time in human history, I think, when the elites, for want of a better term, are actually making money out of betting against the country and the people who elected them. And this is the problem. This all stems from the same problem.
Yeah, that's a...
Here ends a Hitchin-esque polemic.
I was going to send you a picture of the Hitchens book of essays that I'm rereading now.
He was brilliant.
And it's just... It's like eating great food.
The brilliance of the man is... and this is
we miss him now.
Yeah, we do. And the point is, probably politically, I wouldn't agree with him. But in terms of what he had to say and his rational arguments and so on, fantastic stuff.
That's fine. Listen, you don't have to...
And that's my point. That just shows the measure of something you actually want to watch and listen to somebody you might not 100% agree with politically, but you cannot fault his logic and his arguments.
Yeah, the beauty of the arguments. And let's just say he was not... He was not a person to stay in one lane and to
most of these, like
be in a cult.
Another one, the philosopher of the late Roger Scruton was another one who could talk about all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah, these are preeminent people. But then there were lefties like Tony Benn that I always had a lot of respect for.
Tony Benn sort of became a national treasure eventually.
He was a good man. I always liked him. And there were others too. Michael Foot.
Once they stopped being dangerous, they sort of become national treasures.
Well, it's in a way. But, you know, these things... politics makes strange bedfellows, and you never know.
But the conclusion is we are coming to a very dangerous phase in European history, and we are surrounded by leaders who are simply not up to the job.
What a great lead-in. What a great lead-in. You just gave us the... I wish I'd thought of that, because now I'm going to turn to Rusty.
Is he the leader we're looking for?
He may be the leader we're looking for, although he looks a bit like one of Fidel's men in the hills.
Well, it's funny you bring up the wind farms, because that's what I do in my day job when I'm not in Ukraine. I'm actually installing a big wind farm in Germany, in the Baltic Sea at the moment, for a Belgium company called Wind Park. And you're totally right. The effort and resources and money invested in, and the consumption of resources that are used to build the farm,
and the taxpayer
is
subsidy.
ridiculous. And it only, I mean, we've done like a 20 megawatt farm. It's taken us about 6 months to install, and it'll provide energy for about 20,000 homes, which is a lot, but it's nothing compared to what a pipeline of gas will
or a nice nuclear power station.
Yeah, exactly.
You see how I planned that brilliant segue?
Because the point is,
Gosh, I was waiting for that.
If you go through history, a lot of our problems have been solved by technology. And what is one of the most technologically advanced solutions to the energy problem? It is, of course, nuclear power.
Nuclear power seems to be the most sensible.
And we live in an age, it's bizarre now. People want to mock and give up religion, but they go and worship something else instead. It's like G.K. Chesterton said, people who don't believe in God don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. So the green sort of is the new religion, along with other woke causes. But the point is we are putting our faith...
Well, actually, Nietzsche beat him to it.
We're putting our faith in technology.
Chesterton's great.
Burning wood and windmills, something Chaucer might have recognised.
Oh, sure.
But technology moves us forward. We should be moving forward. You go back 50 years, we had Concorde.
Yes.
We had a man on the moon.
Yeah.
And what are we talking about now? We've forgotten.
If you don't use the technology, you lose it. And to coin a phrase, But it's not, I'm not really coining a phrase. That's why I said
No, it's just madness.
But if you don't, then you forget how to do it. I mean, this has happened in the past.
You know,
with various
the argument was made 30
over the
years ago.
centuries.
Oh, it takes...
Over the millennia.
Oh, it takes 15, 20 years to build a nuclear power station, whatever it takes. Okay.
Well, we can't
I
build
had this argument 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, had people actually gone and done it then instead of thinking it was going to take too long, we'd have had 10 years of usage.
Yeah.
Because we've all survived those, 30 years, and we're still where we were, except in a slightly worse position, because the world has slightly changed, and Europe's place in the world has slightly changed. And we're now in threat from places like China. Because we said, it's a good idea, I'm going to be very wealthy, I'm going to close down my factory in Detroit and move it to Guangdong or wherever. And I get a lot of money, and my family's okay, but your family, the tens of thousands of other families are not good. But I don't care.
Yeah.
And then the Chinese turn around and
it's
say...
not very Adam Smith, is it?
No, and then the Chinese turn around and say, guess what? Haha, you can't have what you want now unless you do it our way.
Unless you do it our way. And by the way, you need that medicine.
And,
we decided to put a moratorium on, X.
Well, we saw the time of last year's coronavirus pandemic.
Rusty can't deliver.
Sorry, I mustn't dominate the programme.
No, let's go over to Rusty.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know you're brilliant as usual, and you're always making excellent points. We have great conversations when we're not on camera.
We do.
Yeah. But we've got Tony as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to get to the main event. And actually, my brilliant segue wasn't to the windmills, but it was when you were talking about dangerous places and the elites looking away. And that's where Rusty has been on the front line. He was kind enough. This is a measure of you, Rusty. The measure of the man is that I meant to ask him. We saw each other on Sunday, and I forgot entirely just to ask him to come on for a longer explanation. I called him yesterday. I said, "Oh gosh, I forgot to ask you." We were standing right next to each other last night, and I said, "Will you come, please? Because we need to get this, get your experience on the show and talk about it with a good crew." And we have an excellent crew to do that with you and Tony. And he said yes right away, but then he forgot he had an appointment at the Australian Embassy. Australian Embassy, was
I've put it off 3 times. What's one more time?
And you put it off for us. So
I don't want my Australian passport back. I've got my a Polish one.
Okay, I appreciate it because I know how these things are. It can be stressful when you miss those appointments for these documents.
Oh, good.
So you're really. We really appreciate that. Okay, may I now get to the main event? And we may have to turn to Tony a little bit here as our resident intelligence expert to comment as well. But let's just go through some of the places you've been. We've got some photographs to illustrate some of this. Some of it's going to be pretty disturbing. There's death and destruction involved. You've been there. Can you give us when did you take off to the Ukraine? What was your initial mission on this trip?
3 weeks ago we left.
Yeah.
And it was primarily to it teamed up with a lovely lady by the name of Miriam Lambert, and she runs an NGO called Orphans Feeding organisation. And they actually travel around the world building orphanages and help feed them and educate them. And she does that all around the world. And she's also recently been investing some time in Ukraine. So
you have a contact for her?
Yeah,
I think we'll get her on the
for sure.
Get her on the phone.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
she'd love it. She's a great lady. And she spent the last four months liaising with another girl that I work with as well. And they both sourced donations through the EU Medical Board for this cancer medicine that was all donated by the EU Medicine Board, which was the first time they've ever donated to Ukraine. And they had to form a few different NGOs because when they first approached the EU, they were too small to be looked at, and they had to go through a few hoops, and they had to form something with the Ukrainian oncology NGO as well. It was quite a complex procedure, but they managed to push through it. And we teamed up, and we ended up meeting her in Warsaw and loading up the vans that had come from Latvia in a big cooler van, a big cooler truck, and we loaded it into our vans, and we departed. Yeah,
that's a heavy load.
Yeah, it was.
In many ways.
It was. Yeah.
Well, okay. So then you were delivering that where?
So we had planned to go to Zhytomyr, Chernihiv.
Can you Tell everybody just a little bit where those places are.
Zhytomyr is
relative
about
to Kyiv, for
1.5 hours west of Kyiv, so
Okay.
it's just before Kyiv.
Yeah.
Relatively safe, although it has been bombed a fair few times lately as well. But the reason we stopped there was because we were meeting up with some other friends of hers that had another stockpile of also amazing medicine that had been donated by Japan and Hong Kong, and they had a full stockpile as well, and they were nice enough to give us that as well, and to also add that to our vans, and we also unloaded to various hospitals on
So there's
on
a
their
very
behalf
high
too.
value, monetary,
It was, yeah.
money value, cash value on
yeah,
this.
it was
right?
like $350,000 of just the cancer medicine that we brought from Poland, in addition to the stuff that we picked up in Zhytomyr.
So you're
which
talking about
I don't
probably
know what it was.
$500,000 worth of stuff.
Yeah, it was. That's
Wow.
where it got a bit.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. But we had a lot of help along the way, and I've got some really good friends in Kyiv. They're called the Ghosts of Ukraine, and there's another organisation called Yankee Charlie Tango, I think they are, and they provided me with all ghost houses, and they specialise in just making sure your stuff is kept safe, secure, without any possible chances of anyone, coming across it, because it's quite a high risk these days of getting into the wrong hands. A lot of humanitarian aid's resold and taken away, and
There's a black
and
market.
whatnot. It's happening.
Read Catch
everywhere.
22.
Yeah, it's
If you
shocking.
want to know what it's like, right?
It's shocking.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah.
There's always a black market
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
there
war.
is.
There's
There
a lot
is.
of thievery
Yeah, there is.
and a lot of misdirection to the wrong hands.
Yeah.
So the government or the hospitals or the institutions, it goes into private hands
Yeah.
straight away. So
Big bucks.
I guess you were very conscious of that.
Yeah,
How do you you deliver the stuff right to the hospital? How do you make sure that it's going to the right place?
So that was
You
the
do what you
whole.
can.
That was a big part of it. This lady Miriam had been liaising with the oncology heads of directors of these units for like 3 or 4 months, and had arranged everything well well before time. And 2 of the places were quite helpful and very, very accommodating. And they did meet us at the Chernihiv hospital, and they had the directors there, they had the oncology units there, and we were able to go through the hospital and meet the patients and actually deliver the actual boxes directly to the patients. That was the idea, and that is sort of what's
So
expected.
you think it's safe once
EU.
they're in the hands of the doctors?
Some yes, some not.
But you don't know.
Some there aren't, because there's a lot of corruption there as well, and this is something that I was exposed to along the way, and it was quite remarkable to see. I had no idea that was going on. But the third delivery, I won't name names or anything, but the third oncologist was on the sketchy side, and he had his own NGO that he formed, and he wasn't aligning with the rules of the donations. I mean, all the donations are being given by the EU. They want to strictly ensure that it is going to the right place and it's not just being thrown into some warehouse and resold. The Minister of Health in Ukraine, it's been quite well known for a lot of corruption, a lot of medicines being sold to pharmacies and not going to where it needs to go. So it's a very touchy subject.
We got to stop there, and there are going to be some messages. So I want everybody to watch the messages, and we'll be back with the second half more with Rusty and Nicholas and Tony, of course, in Bydgoszcz. Fascinating stuff. Thanks for watching. Oh, this is my book, Rome. Get it on Amazon. My goodness, what are you waiting for? Those cows are beautiful. See you in a minute. Enjoy the messages. Just putting on Rusty's cap, you can see that it fits my big head perfectly. That's a good look for me. Serious topics will be discussed. Thank you very much. We have to exchange for a very big head, perhaps a pumpkin. At any rate, we are back. Thank you for staying with us. And we have Tony Gonzalez, McFarlane Gonzalez, in Bydgoszcz. And we have Nicholas Richardson with cogent commentary here in studio. And of course, our special guest is Rusty Russell, just back from the Ukraine with many exciting stories and, I should say, enlightening stories. Yeah. You took a number of photographs of we were talking about the medical aid. Let's move on to some of the war stuff. I think there's two things to talk about. Right now, there appears to be a stalemate in the center, in the Donbass, right? Tony, what are you hearing about Kherson right now?
There is a counteroffensive that was just launched, started yesterday in the morning around, they started the counteroffensive around 7 o'clock in the morning. They haven't gained any ground. They are shelling them. The equipment that has been brought to the west has been pushed to the forefront. But other than that, that's all we have so far. I've been reading the intelligence that's been coming in from the intelligence community, and they have nothing as well. They just know that the counteroffensive is there. There is a lot more northern bombings lately from Russia coming down into the Ukraine. So that is very indicative of to what Rusty would have encountered in over the northeast regions over there in Kherson and Kyiv and those regions. So it's very indicative. But the one thing that we're kind of curious is if they have had any bombings or any artillery incoming from the Belarusian side on the northern part. That's actually kind of been quiet, and that's one of our concerns in the community.
Right. Thank you for that. Rusty, we'll come back to a little bit about Kherson at the end, maybe speculate a little bit based on what we know and what we think might happen. You were in Kharkiv, and Kharkiv has been under fire recently and under attack in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks. About the time you got there, the Russians started shelling again. Can you tell us a little bit about your contact with the war? First-hand contact.
Yeah, so we were there for maybe 2 weeks, and every night you'd hear shelling. There'd be 4 or 5 missile strikes that you would hear, quite within close proximity. Not central Kharkiv, not the city centre, but on a 5K radius outside from the city centre. So pretty close. However, 3 days ago, the city centre, no, it was 2 days ago, the city centre was struck, and there was a big pothole in the dead centre of the road, right beside a bar and a restaurant where we used to eat, which is quite scary. It's a dead centre hit, which means they're looking for civilians and tourists that actually normally frolic around those regions.
I would say not many tourists, but travellers anyway.
But travellers, yeah.
People who are
that's for sure.
Not knowing necessarily, you don't really know what you're getting into till you're there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's happening, and then it seems unreal.
Yeah.
And you also don't know where these strikes will happen.
No idea. You really don't. It's just a gamble.
It's a big gamble. Yeah. I mean, people need to understand that. It is a gamble. This is very serious combat.
Yeah.
And very serious targeting with the missiles and the artillery on civilian targets. Which Putin said he was going to do, right?
Yeah, but then again, you've got the direct hit ones that they seem that they're accurate and they're precisely engaged. I mean, the one in Seltvika was the 3-building complex with all the deaf families that were living there. On the Russian news, shortly after, it was saying that there were 12 military vehicles parked there and seeking sanctuary there. So. That seems like it was a direct hit. They all say no. Ukraine say absolutely
not true.
No.
We know that Tony's saying not true.
It's not true. There were no military guys located. No military personnel were located in those buildings. So it was just a targeted opportunity.
Yeah.
It's sticking to his decorum of being scorched earth.
Yeah.
He doesn't care.
Yeah.
And that's flat out. There were no military vehicles from the CCTV footage that was there near the buildings. Nothing.
That's exactly what we heard as well. It was just rubbish, Russian news just claiming, I mean, the building and the project director and all the families that we were speaking to, they're just a deaf family, a complex of underprivileged, harmless Ukrainians. There was no military there, absolutely not. So, I mean, that seems like if it was a direct hit or not, and they wanted to just create that story themselves. Who knows?
Well, we know this is the trail of deception from the beginning. So I mean, the only reason I asked that was to hear if we had any other information about it. I don't think any of us can believe what we're hearing from Russian propaganda. But both sides are doing propaganda, but one side invaded the other, so one side's allowed, right? The Ukrainians are allowed. They didn't start this. Gosh, what a mess. How are we going to get out of it? I want to stress also that the danger of this particular war is unlike the danger of Iraq and Afghanistan. Isn't it, Tony?
Yeah, it's even more dangerous than World War II. The reason I say that is because Nick hinted at the power situation that we have, and we are going to be putting millions of people at risk and death potentially in Europe. And I'm not saying millions will die, but I'm saying there are millions of people that are at risk for death. And that's not
during the winter.
For the But then the one thing that really worries me, and the last time that Nick was on the show when Rusty was still in the Ukraine, is that we touched on the nuclear power plants. This is something that we have to take really seriously because we don't know the state of these power plants. And the biggest one in Europe, if I'm not mistaken, is in Ukraine, and it's actually under Russian control. And they have not allowed any of the investigators to go in there to see what they're doing, what else, let alone what they're conducting, what kind of we don't know. We can't even say what the heck they're doing. So that's the worry that we have. Yeah. And then let alone, then we also have Chernobyl, which is still extremely unstable, and it's actually becoming destabilized from the stable situation that they've had in the past 10, 15 years.
Right. Rusty, what did you hear about the... you were near the power station,
Zaporozhye? No, we never made it that far.
You didn't make it that far.
But this morning I spoke with some friends, and they've acquired the Giga, the gamma reader.
Geiger counter.
Yeah, and and they're actually on their way there now to take readings.
And the Ukrainian authorities have been
position themselves around there.
Giving out iodine tablets to people in the vicinity.
Yeah, and they've also even been practicing the alerts, the what to do and listen to sirens. They've given those alerts even to the NGOs, so that's something that we all need to really take account into here, especially us here in Poland, since we're so close to the eastern border.
Yeah, there's a macabre addition to this, lighthearted, of course. Red wine apparently is good. People who drank red wine before the Chernobyl accident were much better off than those who had not consumed red wine specifically.
That's useful.
I learned that in Chernobyl when I went there in 2006.
Iodine and Red Bull and red wine.
Yeah. Interesting, isn't it?
It is.
What's the spread rate if there was to be a leak or has it been specified where it would reach with winds?
Depends on which way the wind is blowing and what kind of leak it is.
Exactly.
Because Chernobyl went all over,
all over the place,
all over Europe, basically, even to England, Britain.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
There were traces there. Yeah.
Jesus.
And so this is it's really interesting that the time that it's beyond interesting. It's just soul destroying. Actually, is what it is. There's a time when we're looking for energy. All this energy is being wasted in the name of what?
But a lot of it, he's doing this deliberately, but let's...
Well, yes, but in the name of what?
Yeah, but a lot of energy, if we're talking about energy, a lot of energy is wasted anyway, because a lot of these, if you look at these aerial maps, Lagos Bay in Nigeria, they flare off as a byproduct of the extracting of oil for petroleum products. They flare off enough natural gas to power London, a city of 8 million people. That's what that gas would do if it was capped, and it's flared off as a waste product. And they used to do this, even in America, they were doing this in Texas.
But they did it with oil wells.
Yes, well, that's what in Nigeria.
They did it in North Dakota.
Yeah, they do it all over because, it's the oil companies have a different mentality. They want oil. And the fact that you could do something useful with the gas requires somebody to have it requires somebody actually to turn the oil off for a time, which nobody wants to do. But West Africa. If you go to West Africa, they're dying for energy. They're short of energy, And there in Lagos, you could capture this gas that's flared off, and you could do something really useful with it, but everybody's too corrupt, nobody can be bothered. So while these oil companies are taking out adverts in the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal saying we're very green, blah, 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 down in Lagos, they're paying people off and they don't care how much they pollute and how much damage they do. And this is, again, goes back to this different point about we're now ruled by people who are utterly cynical.
Read the part about Nigeria in my book.
I've read the part.
Did I tell you about my book?
I've read your book, yes. And this is what we're dealing with.
It talks exactly about oil in Nigeria.
We are living,
early
unfortunately, in an Orwellian age when our leaders, all of them, now say things which they know not to be true. And they're kidding us. And we know that when von der Leyen, the European Union head of the Commission, says, oh, it's going to be tough for this winter. Yes, it is, but not for her and not for people like her.
Well, that's
and this is part of the problem. The elites of our countries no longer share any interest with the country. You go back in the UK, go back, say, 50 years, people like Macmillan, Eden, they had and Douglas Hume.
They were trying to pay off the taxes on their estates.
Well, yeah, but I chose them because they all three went to Eton, all three went to Oxford.
Yeah.
But you felt they were trying to do a good job. You scroll forward to the next time you had that coincidence, and it's David Cameron and Boris Johnson.
Well, now, who don't appear anywhere on the street, but those, I mean, I ran into Douglas Hume in the street.
But Eden had been in the army, so nobody had a bad word to say about Eden, because he knew. They'd fought, so they were part of their country. The country meant something, and this lot don't care.
Yeah. It's worth people looking up some of these names: Anthony Eden, Michael Foot, even Neil Kinnock, people like this. Of course, Margaret Thatcher, going back and looking at some of the things these people said and the way they behave.
Exactly.
Is quite different.
Very, very different. So that's part of the problem. We're facing some very grave crises, and we don't have people with the intellectual ability, or worse than that, they not even have the integrity or the even wish to solve the problem. And this is the frightening thing. We've seen this ridiculous spectacle in the United Kingdom of this Tory party leadership thing. These people, there are only 160,000 people get to vote, and these two people, Sunak and Truss, have been going around the country. There are more important things to do, and this is self-indulgence of the worst type, because, whoever wins, it's not actually going to solve the problem.
Yeah, we have to...
we have Scholz in Germany, who's compromised, in my view. He was, during the old days, he was always nipping over the border to East Germany, the only one the police never stopped, because he was, a cheerleader for the East German regime.
And is Poland caught in the middle, as historically they always have been?
To a certain extent, yes.
Yeah.
It is caught in the middle, but unfortunately we're all caught in the middle now, because there seems to be nobody anywhere with any sense. I mean, I saw that clip you sent me of President Trump 4 years ago at the United Nations saying Germany's going to become dependent on Russian gas,
right? And
that's a bad thing. And all the German delegation in the United Nations sitting there smirking. And here we are today.
Yeah. Difficult. You can't escape.
I'm not saying...
Tony, jump in.
Yeah.
No, I was actually going to say that's actually one of the things that they ridiculed him over in the United States, that he was ridiculing his allies, that he was spying on his allies. Well, the allies were doing some shady stuff behind it, and that's exactly what it was. The elitists in Germany were just trying to fill their pockets because they saw the opportunity that they wanted to get in bed with Russia, and Russia has always been in bed with the Germans. The Germans have always had a vested interest with their ally from the East, and that's the one thing that Russia was being but Trump was exposing. And then they ridiculed him, and they still ridicule him for that.
I think it's the Marla Maples thing. That really, it started then. Marla Maples and Ivana Trump, that bad publicity, and ever since then his hair has been out of control. But it's hard to say anything good about Donald Trump in any way these days.
To say something very, very unpopular, because this is the sort of program where you can. Obviously we have to stop the Russians just marching into any country they like.
Why?
Because we just can't have anybody march, because if they march into one, they may march into another.
I'm an isolationist.
Yes, well, you are, but you're American.
I'm an isolationist. The reality is... Why should we care about anyone else?
Yes, but exactly. But the reality is, if you had gone back 2 years or whatever, Ukraine...
I'm not an isolationist.
Ukraine would not necessarily be the country. You have this bastion of light and integrity and political fantasticness that you would necessarily want to support. I mean, that's the point. It was, and part of its own problem, because it was actually a fairly corrupt country. Now, there were people trying to do something about it, but the reality was, like many of the post-Soviet regimes that came in, they had a long way to go. And so many people, as this winter comes, will think, hang on a minute, we were told that we had to make sacrifices, in many cases with members of our family, to sort out the Middle East and sort out Afghanistan, and then we end up running out. We're now being told we have to make even greater sacrifices on a personal level for the benefit of Ukraine. Why are our politicians doing that, which is fine? At the same time, they're saying we, the people, have to bear the burden, while they themselves clearly, and those in big business who support them clearly, are not shouldering any part of this burden. And this is, I think, going to be one of the things which is going to come to the fore in the winter. There'll be a mass movements of
There's going to be a lot of protests.
of civil society across the United States, and well, the United States, they're fighting themselves over something else anyway already. But in Europe, particularly, they say, "Hang on a minute, what does this really mean? Why? Surely clever people can bring this war to an end, because it's not doing anybody any good." And this is the pressure that will come, and there's going to be no answer to that, unfortunately, because while Boris Johnson is sending all our Narev missiles to Ukraine, of course, he at the same time, he'll only be Prime Minister for another week, at the same time he's cutting the British Army to a figure which is, ridiculous. And so people will ask what's going on, because none of it is logical.
I want to come back to Rusty now, because we're running down time. And we've got two things that are important to talk to Rusty about that we haven't discussed. One of those is the delivering 3 tons of food. We talked about medical and food. What's most important stuff? Medicine, food, and energy.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's the order, but those, I guess, food's first. But you delivered 3 tons of food. How did that come about, and where was it?
This was another interesting thing. Every good deed you try and do, you encounter little pockets of corruption along the way. And there was another thing that happened on this little trip. Again, my friend Miriam Lambert managed to speak with some big people high up in the World Central Kitchen.
Yeah.
They're an incredible organisation.
Yep.
We got to their factory in Kyiv, and they actually told us to stand back while they all just loaded the vehicle for us. They were incredible. They were really, really on par. They were fast-paced, they were ready to go, and they actually allowed us to take the food out, which I don't think they allow anyone to do. They only work with one NGO, and they go through them for deliveries and for transport. However, we managed to get 3 tons because we suggested we wanted to take it to a certain location where they don't want to send vehicles. Mm-hmm. However, they also at the same time had a World Central Kitchen representative in that town that they don't want to send vehicles to. So it was quite strange. If they're willing to position a representative there, then you'd think they'd also send vehicles there. But they didn't. So we went there. It was a little town called Zolishon, and then we went further on beyond Zolishon. And the food was meant to go to Zolishon. However, we had planned that we were meant to meet the mayor and the local community leaders, and they were meant to have the city people there waiting for the food. However, when we arrived, there was some serious shelling going on, and it was quite all the air raid alarms were happening, and so it sort of created a little bit of a chaotic moment where there was no one there. So we didn't want to just leave it there, because it's the same thing again. You don't know where it's going to get taken. You don't know where it's going to go. So we spoke with the World Food Kitchen lady there, and she managed to make some phone calls, and then within the hour we were driving to little villages, and every village that we arrived to, they had little babushkas there waiting with all their little locals, and we were getting crowds of 60 to 70 people at each spot, and unloading the food there.
Amazing.
So it was really, really. I mean, these people were in dire straits. They had nothing. They were elderly people that can't fend for themselves, and obviously have no money, and all the food supply chain there is non-existent, and they're too scared to leave as well.
This is near Kharkiv.
This is about 2 hours drive north of Kharkiv. This is on the Russian border.
So back towards Kyiv that way?
No, north from Kharkiv.
Oh, Kharkiv is that far from the border?
Yeah, it's about 1.5 hours or so.
Right. Okay, just to get the geography correct.
Yep.
And there was one other thing. You said there was a missile strike near Kharkiv that you happened upon, or happened in your vicinity, or you went to aid? What happened with that?
That was the Saltvika one.
Yeah.
That was the one that we were talking about before with the deaf families living in the complex. Yeah, we went there first thing in the morning because it was so close, and it was the largest rocket strike we'd heard that trip. There were like 8 missiles that night.
Oh.
So we went there first thing in the morning and watched the devastation, and we assisted with.
What's the most positive thing? Thank you. What's the most? We're running down to time, so I'm happy to hear all of you talk, and Tony too, of course. What is the most positive thing that comes out of this experience? What's your greatest fear?
My greatest fear, or the most positive thing?
Both. Give us your greatest fear, then give us the positive thing. Yeah.
My greatest fear, I suppose, is not knowing how long this thing's going to continue for. My fear, is just being at the wrong spot at the wrong time, I suppose. That's
as an ex-soldier, you've been in that position
You've only
before.
got luck on your side, really. It's
Yeah.
just a gamble that you really can't. There's no methodical workings out. It's just luck of the game. So yeah,
It's a gamble.
being in the
It's
right
a risk.
spot at the right time.
It's a gamble. It's a risk for the people on the ground doing what you're doing. It's also a gamble and a risk for, in a larger sense, for people who are dependent in Europe on energy and food from this area. So, as Tony was outlining, it's going to be a very difficult winter.
Yeah,
I fear.
it will.
And I think the war's going on for a long time.
That's the new hype now. The last 3 or 4 days, it's all becoming the winter preparation now. All the information, all the group chats, all the requests now are primarily going towards how we're going to fix the winter.
So
and
is
prepare
that
them.
the positive thing, or is there any?
Well, the positive side of that is that we're thinking about it ahead of time. All the groups, all the teams, all the NGOs are aware of it, and they're thinking about it now, as opposed to waiting for a month. And so we're preparing generators, clothes, and this type of thing.
All right, so now we're getting used to the situation and planning ahead rather than
it is
being just victims of the
proactive.
situation. And I guess that's the most positive we can be right now, if we're realistic. Okay, I want to thank you very much for coming in, my
All right,
friend. And as always, Nicholas.
Always a pleasure.
No relation, but too bad for me. And Tony McFarlane Gonzalez, thank you, sir, for your cogent comments, as usual, and bring us up to date on some of the security and intelligence. Yeah, very much appreciated, as always. Okay, I'm Will Richardson. This has been There's a Will. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next show. And buy my book. It's amazing. It's like, that's what he told me. Yeah, so, okay. See you next time. Oh, by the way, did I say you're looking well? Stay that way.